In the late 18th century, the region between South Africa's Drakensberg Mountains and the Indian Ocean was a patchwork of independent Nguni chiefdoms. Age-old tribes jostled for cattle, land and power under the looming shadows of drought and conflict. Two rising kingdoms, the Mthethwa under the visionary chief Dingi Sweyo and the Ndandwe under the fierce king Zwidi, vied for dominance in this volatile land. It was an era of upheaval and consolidation, a time that would later be known as the Umfukani, or the Crushing, for its massive waves of warfare and migration that shattered old orders. Into this world of chaos and possibility, a child was born who would remake the map. Shaka Zulu, the one whom history would remember simply as Shaka Zulu. Shaka's beginnings were as humble as they were difficult. Born around 1787 to Chief Senzangakona of the Zulu clan and Nandi, a woman of the Lanjeni clan, Shaka's birth violated Zulu custom and was stigmatized as illegitimate. According to oral tradition, his very name stemmed from scandal. Senzangakona initially denied Nandi's pregnancy, dismissing her condition as an affliction by an Ishaka beetle in her belly. Thus the boy came to be called Shaka, a living reminder of his father's scorn. From the outset, mother and son were shunned. Senzangakona reluctantly accepted Nandi as a junior wife, but their union was fraught. Eventually, the chief cast out Nandi and the young Shaka from his kraal, that means village. Nandi sought refuge back among her people, the Lanjeni, where Shaka grew up fatherless and ridiculed, a boy mocked and bullied by his peers. The pair wandered in search of sanctuary, enduring hardship and humiliation that forged Shaka's early resolve. Around 1802, during a time of famine, Nandi and Shaka found asylum with the powerful Mthethwa kingdom. There, under Chief Dingi Sweyo, who was Nandi's distant kinsman, Shaka was finally welcomed instead of reviled. In Dingi Sweyo's kraal, the outcast boy would become a warrior. The adversity of Shaka's youth, the sting of being unwanted, and the burden of shame kindled within him a fierce drive to prove himself and to never be at the mercy of others' contempt again. As a tall, strong young man, Shaka found his purpose in the military life of the Mthethwa. Around the age of 23, he was drafted into an Mthethwa Ibuto regiment, where he finally discovered camaraderie and respect on the battlefield. Shaka served with distinction in the Ezekwe regiment, quickly rising through the ranks by virtue of his courage, strength, and keen mind. He showed a natural talent for warfare, outmaneuvering opponents in mock combats and real skirmishes alike, and these exploits soon drew the attention of King Dingi Sweyo himself. Impressed, Dingi Sweyo promoted Shaka to commander and even entrusted him with his own military homestead. The once exiled youth earned a laudatory praised name, Nodumelezi, the one who, when seated, causes the earth to rumble, reflecting the fierce presence he brought to war. Under Dingi Sweyo's mentorship, Shaka sharpened his understanding of strategy and statecraft. The Mthethwa king was a skilled tactician and diplomat who had begun uniting clans under a loose leadership, and Shaka eagerly absorbed these lessons. Yet Shaka's vision for warfare would ultimately exceed his teachers. Where Dingi Sweyo preferred alliance and limited conquest, Shaka imagined total victory. In the Mthethwa military kraals, Shaka's brutal genius started to bloom, a single-minded focus on war as a tool to remake the world. In 1816, fate handed Shaka the opportunity to claim his birthright. His father, Chief Senzangakona, died that year, leaving the Zulu chieftaincy to a son from another wife. Backed by Dingi Sweyo's warriors, Shaka moved swiftly to assert his claim. In a bloodless coup, he confronted his half-brother, Sijujana, the interim Zulu leader, seizing the throne of the small Zulu clan for himself. Thus, Shaka became chief of the Zulu, a clan of fewer than 1,500 people at that time, one of the tiniest among hundreds of Nguni clans. From the outset, the new Zulu chief ruled with an iron hand, showing no mercy to dissent. Though he now led the Zulu, Shaka remained a servant under Dingi Sweyo's Mthethwa Confederacy. Even so, he was given unusual leeway to expand his power. Wasting no time, Shaka reorganized and drilled the Zulu fighting men, instilling the rigorous discipline he had learned. With Dingiswayo's blessing, Shaka also began conquering and assimilating nearby clans to grow his fledgling domain. Smaller neighbours, including the Langeni of his childhood torment and the Buthelezi clan, soon felt the force of the upstart Zulu chief. Those who yielded were absorbed into Shaka's following. Those who resisted were crushed. In less than a year, the once insignificant Zulu had more than quadrupled in number. The boy who had once been a homeless outcast was now a rising conqueror, determined to unite the land under his singular rule. Shaka's ascent accelerated after a dramatic turn of events around 1817, the death of his patron, Dingiswayo. War had ignited between the Mtetwa and their northern rivals, the Ndandwe. In one confrontation, Dingiswayo was captured by King Zwidi of the Ndandwe and executed. Some later accounts even suggest Shaka held back his forces during this battle, a calculated betrayal to let his overlord fall, though firm evidence of such treachery is lacking. What is certain is that with Dingiswayo gone, the Mtetwa Confederacy was left leaderless and vulnerable. Shaka swiftly filled the vacuum. Assuming leadership over the Mtetwa alliance, he merged its forces with his own growing army, effectively becoming the paramount leader of both the Zulu and the Mtetwa peoples. Now Shaka's only remaining challenge was Zwidi's powerful Ndandwe kingdom to the north. The showdown came in 1818 in what is now celebrated as a testament to Shaka's strategic brilliance. Determined to eliminate this last threat, Shaka and Zwidi faced off in a series of battles that would decide the fate of Zululand. In an early engagement at Lockley Hill, Shaka's forces managed to repel a probing Ndandwe incursion through superior tactics and control, but Zwidi soon retaliated with his full might. In April 1818, the Ndandwe king sent his entire army, thousands strong, into Zulu territory to crush Shaka once and for all. Shaka met this onslaught with shrewd deception. Pretending to cower, he withdrew his troops strategically, luring Zwidi's warriors ever deeper into unfamiliar terrain and stretching their supply lines. The Ndandwe pursued, believing Shaka on the run. Then, at the Umklatuze River, Shaka sprang his trap. Having exhausted and overextended the invaders, the Zulu regiments wheeled around and fell upon the Ndandwe with ferocious force. In the ensuing battle, Shaka won a decisive victory, utterly routing Zwidi's army. The Ndandwe state was shattered beyond recovery, its power broken, its king a fugitive. In the aftermath, the Ndandwe refugees scattered to the winds. Fragmented bands fled far from Shaka's reach, trekking north to establish new kingdoms of their own. Their exodus spread warfare and upheaval into Central and East Africa, extending the turmoil of the Umfukani far beyond Zululand. Back in the Zulu heartland, Shaka emerged supreme. By 1820, he had no major rivals left in the region of modern KwaZulu-Natal. In a span of just a few years, this once obscure chieftain had vanquished the most powerful armies around him through sheer audacity and tactical genius. Shaka's triumphs were not due to numbers alone, but to his radical transformation of warfare and governance. Upon taking power, he revolutionized the Zulu military, turning a relatively small clan militia into a fiercely efficient war machine. Before Shaka, Nguni battles had been ritualized skirmishes. Combat was brief and almost cautious, with the weaker side quick to withdraw before too many warriors fell. Shaka swept aside this old way of war. His first innovation was to rearm his fighters. He introduced the Yikulwa, a long-bladed, short-hafted stabbing spear designed for close combat. This weapon, named for the sucking sound it made when wrenched from a victim's wound, forced warriors to engage the enemy at deadly range. No longer would Zulu fighters stand at a distance hurling light assegai throwing spears. Now they would surge forward behind heavy cowhide shields and fight hand-to-hand until one side was annihilated. Shaka also standardized the traditional throwing spear itself, but forbade his men from casting their Yikulwa in battle. Each warrior had to close with the enemy and kill at spear point, or be killed himself. Losing one's issued spear was punishable by death, a harsh incentive to hold the line. Complementing the new armaments was a dramatic tactical overhaul. Shaka drilled his army in a brilliant battlefield formation called the Buffalo Horns. Instead of a single massed attack, the Zulu was divided into coordinated elements. The chest, the main front of veteran warriors, would pin the enemy with a head-on assault, while two swift horns raced out to encircle the flanks and the rear. Meanwhile, a loins of reserve troops waited hidden or seated behind the main force, ready to reinforce or exploit a break in the enemy line. This encirclement tactic, supervised by battlefield officers using hand signals, proved devastatingly effective. Time and again, Shaka's foes found themselves fixed in place by the Zulu chest, only to be suddenly ambushed from the sides and rear by the Horn regiments, surrounded with no escape. The bullhorns formation, simple yet ingenious, became the signature of Zulu warfare. Years later, its potency would even humble modern armies. In 1879, Zulu forces, using Shaka's encircling tactics, would annihilate a British column at Isandlwana, handing the British army one of its worst defeats at the hands of indigenous fighters. Such was the enduring power of Shaka's methods. In order to mold his warriors into an unbeatable force, Shaka also enforced iron discipline. Training was relentless. He toughened his soldiers by banning sandals and making them run barefoot over thorny ground to harden their feet. His men had to cover astonishing distances, up to 50 miles in a single day, so that they could strike with sudden speed. They travelled light, living off the land by requisitioning grain and cattle from local kraals as they marched. The impact of Shaka's wars rippled far beyond the Zulu heartland, triggering the Mfakani, the great crushing and scattering of peoples across southern Africa in the 1820s. Although Shaka's own conquests focused mainly on the coastal areas of what is now KwaZulu-Natal, the fear and domino effect they generated proved immense. Marauding clans fled the Zulu onslaught, colliding with their neighbours and setting off a deadly chain reaction of conflict and migration. It was like a stone cast into a pond, waves of violence spreading in concentric circles. Entire societies were uprooted. It is estimated that Shaka's wars caused the death of over 1 million people, directly or indirectly. Famine and depopulation followed the carnage. In huge swathes of the interior, crops lay untended and granaries empty as surviving populations fled for their lives. Old chiefdoms vanished forever, and new polities rose from the ashes as relentless struggle became the order of the day. In 1828, after a reign of 12 extraordinary years marked by a mood of tyranny and bloodshed, Shaka Zulu would meet his death, aged 41. His half-brothers Dingane and Umlungana turned on him and assassinated the Zulu leader to save their nation as they saw it. They hastily buried Shaka's body in an unmarked pit beneath the floor of an empty grain hut, hiding the deed until they could secure their hold on power. The spot of Shaka's grave remains a place of legend and memory today. Dingane assumed the kingship, but the shadow of Shaka would loom large over him, and indeed over all of southern Africa, in the years to come. Historians continue to study and debate Shaka's life, sifting fact from legend. His biography is layered with oral tradition, colonial-era writings, and later nationalist interpretations. Numerous colourful tales, some likely exaggerated by storytellers or biased observers, have woven themselves into the Shaka legend. What remains beyond doubt is that Shaka reshaped the history of southern Africa. By the time of his death, a Zulu empire stood where a patchwork of small chiefdoms once existed. The shockwaves of his conquests dramatically altered demographics and power structures across half of the African continent.